So linking now the theme of social value into well-being, how can we measure the impact on well-being and social value? This is a thorny topic for a lot of government and voluntary organisations. Next slide, please. So what is wellbeing? Karen's given us a very comprehensive overview, and we've talked about that earlier in the meeting, and it is one of the very important components that make up social value. Next slide, please. So social value really is the importance that people place on the changes that they experience in their lives. It's not simply, the economic market value or efficiency or, the pounds that something creates, but rather more it's, increasing our levels of confidence. And as Tom has just told us, resolving our problem debt can increase well-being and therefore increase our social value. These things are important to all of us, but historically we haven't measured them in the same way that we've focused on financial value. But that's changing. More and more organisations and the government are focusing on this, and also a lot of younger employees and organisations are interested in what is my organisation doing more than the bottom line or the balance sheet. They want to make sure that organisations are doing their bit. Next slide, please. So increasingly, organisations are looking more holistically, taking into account the wider economic and social environmental effects of their activities. They can add social value by contributing to the long-term well-being and resilience. And the United Nations have taken a lead with their Sustainable Development Goals, which we've actually got as underlining in a fundamental part of our own business planning activity, as a social charter for the planet. Next slide, please. So how do we measure well-being and social value? I think, to say the least, it can be complex and very time-consuming, as when I come on to tell you about the guidance. I think it has to be proportionate because, to be honest, you could do nothing else but calculate your social value for organisations. So I think we need to find ways of doing it smartly and getting good at this. Next slide, please. So the first area to talk about is the font of all knowledge, if you like, the HM Treasury Green Book, which is considered the go-to place for best practice in measuring social value. For smaller organisations, you can't measure everything in detail, or you do nothing else. There's a big opportunity cost there. But this book actually gives technical guidance and helps decision makers about how to achieve an explicit policy objective and to maximise their social value. It sets out the approach to weighing up the costs and the benefits. The economic case concerns social welfare values or well-being. It's not limited to purely economic effects and takes into account the social and environmental impacts. Next slide, please. So there's an excellent overview of well-being within the Green Book and theories and the science of the practical advice, but it accepts that well-being is central to social value and it introduces a new unit of social value called wellbeing. It's a way that you can actually measure the contribution that an organisation makes to society. So they calculate that a 1 unit increase in life satisfaction for 1 year is worth £13,000. Which is quite interesting. So it gives us an idea of how we can start to actually put some monetary values on these social values. The idea is to measure people ideally before and after your programme or project using pre-validated questions from national data sets so that you can have a before and after picture of the intervention. Next slide, please. So we look at, for example, the life satisfaction of people that have visited a green space in the last week compared to those who haven't. If we said on average that they report a life satisfaction of 7.4 compared to 7.3 of those who haven't visited a green space, the difference is 0.1 wellbeing per person. So we multiply that 0.1 by the value of a Wellbe, £13,000, which gives a value of £1,300 that we can attribute to them having visited a green space. There are other national measures of wellbeing, and let's talk about the personal wellbeing measures that the Office for National Statistics produces. These can be benchmarked against national data down to local authority level, and they ask the respondents, overall, how satisfied are you with your life nowadays? To what extent do you feel that the things you do in your life are worthwhile? How happy did you feel yesterday? And how anxious did you feel yesterday? Subjective well-being is referred to as personal well-being. It's about people evaluating their own lives. These 4 questions are known as the ONS4, and they were first added to the annual population survey in April 2011. The annual population survey is the source of national estimates of personal well-being in the UK that are published quarterly by ONS. Next slide, please. So other measures of well-being are the shorter Warwick and Edinburgh mental well-being scale, and we actually used this approach in the first phase of our mental health Ask project. So you would ask people when you first encounter them how optimistic they've been feeling about the future, and they have to answer on a scale of 1 to 5. If they've been feeling useful, if they feel relaxed, if they deal with their problems well, if they can think clearly, if they've been feeling close to other people and able to make their mind up about things. And I think the fog and confusion that Tom mentioned in the earlier talk could really be exposed, if you like, by the answers to these questions. And then the idea is that after your intervention, for example, debt advice, you go back to that client and you re-ask those questions and you measure how much their sense of well-being has improved in the interim period. Next slide, please. So there are other measures of well-being. OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, that allows comparisons across countries based on 11 topics. These are, I know you won't be able to read these very easily, but I'll tell you what some of them are. The personal security, environmental equality, health status, education, income and wealth, jobs and earnings, and work-life balance. So there's a sort of an international comparison, if you like, for each country across each of those criteria. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at some other organisations then and see what they've been doing. And the Duke of Edinburgh Award is actually very proactive in this area. Although it's been in existence for over 60 years, it helps young people to build lifelong belief in themselves, which in itself increases well-being. It supports people to discover their own talents. And last year they introduced a new strategy, which was called Life Without Limits. And they wanted to demonstrate and measure that they make a real impact to people's lives. So they asked participants to reflect on their experience and what they learned. And they developed a set of questions, which includes the ONS measures of wellbeing that we reviewed earlier. This study is currently in the data collection phase, but I think I'm going to be very interested to see the results of this. Next slide, please. Now, churches, whether you're religious or not, churches have a strong role to play in social cohesion, which might not surprise some people. So the total economic and social value that a church building can generate is at least 12.4 billion a year, averaging out at £300,000 a church. So there's money, 1.4 billion in the direct economic value created by running, staffing and hiring out church buildings, 200 million in the replacement costs of social and community services, 850 million in the replacement cost of volunteers' time, 165 million in well-being value to volunteers, 8.3 billion is the well-being value to the people who benefit from the social and community services. This is the single biggest source of value, and 1.4 billion, which is the well-being value of attending church services. So religious or not, get along to church on a Sunday morning and see your well-being increase. It's rather interesting though, isn't it? I think churches do a lot for cohesion in society. Next slide, please. So what are we doing within Citizens Advice? We calculate our value, our social value, in three main areas. There's the fiscal value. This is how much we save for local and national government due to fewer payments for out-of-work benefits, costly evictions, rehousing of evicted tenants, and less demand on the NHS, as we are doing with the Mental Health Ask project and saving GP time as one example. For public value, when people have got fewer problems, they've got higher levels of well-being. I think that's been the theme that's been running through today and emphasised by Dr. Richardson. Our calculation of public value also includes the value of a volunteer-run service, and as already been said, we value our volunteers very highly and we're very, very grateful to them. We couldn't run our service without our volunteers. And then finally, value to the people we help. We help individual clients to achieve their financial outcomes, for example, like getting backdated benefits, writing off debts and refunds for consumer issues. So that just gives you an overview of the social value that Citizens Advice Portsmouth sees its contribution to social value. I think that's me finished. Yeah. Oh, this is just a summary of data from National Citizens Advice that is collected nationally, but it shows that, you know, our funding that we gathered in the last financial year was 905,000. Our overall financial value to society, I won't read out all the figures, but the public value total we gathered, the value to the people we help. There's quite a complicated algorithm that our national organisation runs for us to be able to produce these social value numbers, and obviously not in this meeting, but if anyone's interested in finding out how that algorithm works, we're more than happy to share that openly with you.